I remember the night he walked into the water. People always assume I choose them, but the truth is simpler. They come to me. He arrived just after midnight, board under his arm, wet sand sticking to his feet as he crossed the empty beach. The tide was pulling outward, breathing slow, calm, my invitation disguised as routine. The moon hung low over the horizon, swollen and pale, its reflection stretching in a trembling line across my surface, a perfect path straight to me. He followed it without hesitation. He was young, strong, the kind of swimmer that believes his body gives him authority over the sea. I felt that confidence the moment he stepped in. It vibrated through the water like warm blood. I let him enter without resistance. The first touch, ankle deep, was gentle. I brushed past him like a greeting. He didn't notice how the temperature dropped, only around him, only where I reached. He waded deeper, knee deep, waist deep. Then he threw himself onto the board and started paddling. His arms cut through me in smooth strokes, each one a heartbeat I could feel. He didn't know I was following each movement like a predator, watching breath patterns. He believed he was alone. He wasn't. Underneath him, beneath a few meters of surface, I narrowed my presence. I coiled myself into a long, slow current that matched his pace exactly. Every time his hand plunged into the water, my tendrils passed between his fingers. He mistook the sensation for cold when he'd reached far enough, farther than he should at night. I lifted the smallest portion of myself, not enough to alarm him, just enough to make his board tilt slightly, as if touched by a current that wasn't there before. He looked behind him. No one. Only the dark horizon, breathing softly. He settled again. That was when I let him feel my first warning. A pulse through the water. A throb beneath him. Not a wave, not the wind. Just my heartbeat pressing upward through the surface. His hands froze on the board. He listened. The sea, to him, was silent. To me, it was screaming his name. He waited a moment, then resumed paddling, this time with less rhythm, more urgency. Humans always do this. They pretend they're calm, while their pulse betrays them. I felt his fear begin to rise like warmth. Spreading out in the water, I circled him once, slow and wide, enough to shift the surface into a ring of faint ripples that expanded evenly around him. He looked down. He saw nothing. Nothing but darkness. But darkness is exactly where I hide. The first true wave approached from behind him. Not one shaped by wind. One shaped by me. It rose steadily, too steady, as if pushed upward by a hand. He noticed too late. The slope grabbed the back of his board and lifted him higher than he expected. He gripped the edges. His breath quickened. As the wave carried him forward, he glanced over his shoulder and finally sensed the wrongness. The water behind him wasn't rising with the wind. It was rising with purpose. He rode the wave anyway. Reflex, training, habit. It didn't matter, because I rode it with him. As the crest curled, I pulled threads of myself upward into shapes. Not full limbs, not yet. Just impressions. Elongated shadows inside the foam. Silhouettes that matched the movement of hands reaching. He saw them. I felt his shock burst through his chest, like a flare. He tried to steer away, I didn't let him. The wave thickened, not just with water, but with density, with muscle I didn't have to show him. It threw him sideways. He tumbled, board cracking against his ribs, air rushing from his lungs as I swallowed him whole. He sank into me with a muted splash. The surface closed above his head. Down here, sound behaves differently. It bends, it muffles, it traps. His scream dissolved before it even left his mouth. I curled around him in the silent dark, letting him float for a moment, suspended in the cold like a single, fragile heartbeat. His hands punched upward, searching for the surface. I let him reach it, a cruel inch. No more. Then I dragged him down again. He struggled hard. The water churned with bubbles, each one a desperate exhale. His heart kicked wildly against his ribs. I heard every beat, felt every pulse against my currents. He kicked toward the surface again. I allowed it, just long enough for his fingers to breach, just long enough for him to hope. Then I pulled him deeper. His lungs burned, his vision dimmed, and inside that fading consciousness, he began to understand that he wasn't drowning in water. He was drowning in me. I wrapped myself tighter, not as hands, not yet, but as pressure, as weight, as intention. His body went still, his eyes wide, staring at the last trail of moonlight above him. I let him see it fade. Only when his final breath escaped, in a trembling stream of bubbles, did I allow myself to shape one limb, one confirmation of what was taking him. A hand, composed of water and shadow, pressed gently against his cheek. His eyes widened with recognition. That was the moment I claimed him. I didn't let his body sink. I didn't let it float. I kept him with me, hidden beneath the currents, rolled through the sand and stone and long trenches where no one dares to look. Days passed. People searched. They dragged nets, boats, divers. None came close. None ever do. I release pieces of him when I choose. A scrap of cloth, a single fin. A board cracked in half. Enough to make them think the sea simply swallowed him. But he didn't drown. He was taken. And he's still here, drifting with the tide inside the place where I keep all the others. Sometimes when the ninth wave rises, you can feel him struggling against the undertow, trying to reach the surface. He never will. He belongs to me now, and if you ever step into the water at night, I'll know. I'll feel it. I'll come, just like I did for him. He thought he was alone on that island. That's why they sent him there. One man, one lighthouse, one strip of rock lost in the middle of black water. The mainland was a faint, jagged line on the horizon when the sky was clear. Most nights, it wasn't. He arrived with 2 suitcases, a crate of food, and a face that tried to look brave. The boat dropped him off, turned around, and left him on the trembling pier with the key in his hand. He didn't know the light was already on, not the electric beam that would sweep the sea. Me. The first rule they gave him was simple. Keep the light running. No matter what you hear, no matter what you see, keep the light running. They never told him why. They never told him what the light was holding back. I watched him from inside the walls as he climbed the spiral staircase for the first time. His boots echoed on each metal step, a regular rhythm I quickly memorized. The air inside my body tasted of salt, rust, and old oil. He ran a hand along the curved wall as he climbed, and I felt the warmth of his skin press into me. He was inside me, and he didn't know. When he reached the lantern room, he stopped and stared at the glass. It was streaked with dried salt and old rain, but the view was still wide endless. The sea circled us in every direction, a dark, shifting skin that never slept. He exhaled slowly, fogging the glass. "All right," he whispered to himself, "let's work." I listened to his thoughts before he even spoke them. Lonely, but peaceful. Remote, but safe. He believed the danger was in the storms, in the rocks, in the waves that could break a ship in half. He didn't understand that the real danger was inside the tower, wrapped around him like invisible lungs. That first night, I was patient. He checked the lamp, cleaned the lens, ensured the rotation mechanism worked. When he finally switched it on, the beam cut through the thickening darkness like a blade. It turned slowly, casting long, sweeping arcs over the black water. Every time the light passed over the sea, I felt something in the distance turn away. Every time the darkness returned, I moved closer to him. Down below, the wind picked up. Rain began to tap against the glass. He smiled, thinking he was safe inside. That was when I took my first breath. He felt it. Not in the air, but in the wall. As he leaned against the circular railing, watching the storm grow, the stone beside him pulsed. It swelled and contracted beneath his palm, a slow, heavy motion, like a giant heart beating behind plaster and brick. He snatched his hand back, stared at the spot, pressed his fingers to it again. It was still. He laughed nervously. Just the wind. The wind wasn't blowing that hard. It wasn't the wind. It was me, waking up. Over the next days, I learned his habits. He woke at dawn, descended my stairs, cooked simple meals in the small kitchen at my base. He talked to himself, to me. He just didn't know who was listening. He spoke about the mainland, about people he missed, about debts and mistakes, and the second chance this job was supposed to be. His voice bounced around my interior, and I absorbed every word. At night, when the light was on, and the world outside vanished into blackness, I began to move. At first, I shifted just enough for him to notice small things. A mug left on the table in the kitchen would be found on the counter by the sink. Boot prints appeared on the stairs, damp, although he hadn't been outside. Ropes in the storage room hung in slightly different positions. He blamed his memory, the isolation, the long hours. Then, I changed the sound. On the fourth night, as he climbed, the echo of his own footsteps did not match the rhythm of his steps. There was an extra sound, a second pair of boots, always half a beat behind. He stopped halfway up the spiral, listened. Silence. He started climbing again, slower. One step. Echo. Another step. Another echo. Then a third echo. Not possible. One man, 3 sets of steps. He froze, his hand tightening around the rail. "Hello," he called. I didn't answer. I just waited until he started moving again, then deliberately shifted the metal under his feet. The stair hummed, a low vibration, as if something enormous was inhaling beneath the floor. He slept poorly after that. He began to talk less. He stopped humming to himself while he worked. His silence tasted different. Sharp, shaky, uncertain. He started to look at the walls instead of through the windows. That was my moment. One night, a dense fog rolled in from the sea, thick enough to swallow sound. He lit the lamp, checked the mechanism, and sat in the lantern room with his logbook open, pen ready. His eyes kept drifting from the paper to the curved white wall around him. Outside, the foghorn moaned. Inside, I moaned back. Not as a horn, as a long, low exhale through the stone. He dropped the pen. It rolled toward the edge of the table and stopped as the entire room expanded around him. The glass creaked in its frame. The metal supports trembled. The wall at his back pushed forward, slowly, deliberately, pressing against his spine like a warm, damp hand. He jumped away from it, heart racing, eyes wide. I held the pressure a second longer, then released it. The room shrank back into its previous shape. The glass settled. The creaking stopped. He could no longer pretend. He placed his hand on the wall again, gently as if approaching an animal that might bite. "Is someone there?" he whispered. This time, I answered. I pushed outward beneath his palm in a single, sudden pulse. The wall flexed, soft and yielding, like flesh. He yanked his hand back with a shout, stumbling into the center of the room. His breath came in sharp bursts. He stared at the white curves surrounding him. My rib cage, my skin, my throat. He ran. Down the stairs. Down my spine, I contracted around him as he descended, tightening the space, making the air thick. Every step echoed back twice, 3 times, as though someone or something were chasing him just out of sight. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the kitchen with every light on, staring at the ceiling while the lighthouse continued to turn, to breathe, to watch. The next day, he tried to rationalize it. The structure was old. The wind could cause vibrations. His mind was playing tricks. He even wrote it in his log. Strange noises, possible structural movement, check supports later. He never got the chance. That evening, the sea rose higher than usual. Waves slammed against the rock, sending spray high enough to kiss the windows. The fog had cleared, but the sky remained heavy and low, smothering the horizon. He almost didn't go up. Almost. But the light had to be maintained. He believed that. He obeyed his orders, so he climbed. Halfway up, I closed the door at the bottom. He didn't notice. Not yet. When he reached the lantern room, the air felt different. Wet. Thick. Every breath tasted of brine and something else. Metallic. Warm. Like the inside of a mouth. He approached the central mechanism to check the lamp, then froze. The glass around him was fogged from the inside. Each pane was filmed with moisture, slowly dripping, as though the lighthouse itself was sweating. The droplets traced long, quivering lines downward, like tears. He raised a hand to wipe one away. Before he could touch it, I exhaled. The entire room pushed outward, then contracted violently. The floor shuddered, the glass rang. The metal frame groaned as if under immense pressure. He fell to his knees. His ears popped. His chest constricted. The air around him became heavy, pressing against his lungs from all sides. He gasped, clawing at his throat. That was when I decided to show him the curved wall to his left bulged, forming a clear imprint. Not abstract, not a suggestion. A face. Eyes closed, enormous, outlined beneath the white plaster. A nose pressing forward, lips forming, stretching, cracking the paint as they pushed through. He scrambled backward, slipping on the wet floor. The eyes opened. They were nothing but empty, deep hollows behind a thin film of stone, but he saw them. He understood. He was inside something that was not supposed to be alive. I spoke to him then, not in words, but in pressure. Every breath he took, I took from him. Every heartbeat, I pressed back against his chest until the rhythm matched mine. He tried to reach the door. I let the floor tilt slightly, just enough for him to fall against the opposite wall. It received him like skin. The surface gave way under his weight. His shoulder sank into it, then his arm, then half his chest. He screamed as the stone swallowed him slowly up to his neck, holding him there in a cold, crushing embrace. His pulse thundered against my interior. I savored it. Outside, the lamp continued to turn, the beam sweeping across the dark water, warning ships away. Inside, I held my keeper inside my own body, pressing him deeper into the wall with every breath. He tried to speak, to beg. All that left his mouth was a wet gasp, absorbed by the lighthouse itself, by me. He is still there. They sent a replacement weeks later, when his report stopped coming. The new keeper found the logbook, the half-cooked food, the unmade bed. He never found the body, but if he ever dares to press his ear to the wall on a quiet night, if he listens closely enough between the wind and the waves, he will hear the faint, muffled sound of someone breathing from inside the stone. Not the lighthouse, me. They built the ship around me. That's the part no one ever understands. They think I boarded it like a passenger, snuck in like a stowaway, slid through a vent or a pipe nut. I was already there, embedded in the metal long before the first tourists stepped aboard. When they welded the plates together in the shipyard, when sparks rained over the half-built frame, they trapped something between the layers of steel, something that shouldn't have been touched, something that should have stayed in the deep place where they found the ore. Me. For years I slept inside the hull, compressed between the metal sheets. My body flattened into a long, silent imprint. I didn't breathe. I didn't think. I existed only as pressure, waiting. Then came the voyage. The ship was enormous, built to carry thousands. Bright carpets, polished railings, gleaming chandeliers. A floating palace designed to keep humans believing the ocean is harmless. It was their mistake to cross the trench. The trench is where the metal used to be, where I used to be, and when the ship glided over it on the fourth night, I recognized the water below me. I woke. My first movement was small, a single twitch against the inner hull plate, a tap that echoed faintly through the lower decks, barely audible. A metallic hiccup. A mechanic heard it. He paused, listened, dismissed it. But I wasn't trying to scare him. I was stretching. For hours, I shifted against the steel, The walls of the storage deck bulged slightly. The rivets trembled. Dust trickled from the ceiling. Metal groaned like a creature clearing its throat. The mechanic returned with a flashlight, tracing the source of the noise. He walked along corridor D4, boots clanking. He paused beside the section of wall where my fingers were pressing outward. I pressed harder. The metal dented. A small, perfect handprint appeared from the inside. 5 long fingers, too thin to belong to a man. He froze. His breath caught. He reached out and touched the indentation. His skin made contact with the steel. So did mine, from the other side. I pushed. The metal flexed under his palm, warm, pliable. It pulsed, responding to my movement like living flesh. He jerked his hand away with a gasp, stumbling backward. The flashlight clattered to the floor. I curled my fingers deeper into the steel, dragging them downward. The wall screeched, long and whining, as if screaming in pain I wasn't harming the ship. I was carving it open. He ran. He didn't get far. When he turned the corner, I reached through a seam near the floor, a thin crack where 2 panels met. My fingers slid through like black needles, impossibly long, impossibly sharp. They brushed his ankle. He fell. He tried to crawl, but I wrapped my hand around his leg from beneath the metal. The plates bent like warm clay as I pulled him back into the darkness. His screams were muffled by the clang of steel, deforming, swallowing him. I absorbed him into the hull. Humans don't realize how soft they are, how easily they compress. His bones made a satisfying series of cracks as he became part of the metal he'd been hired to maintain. After that, I explored. I spread through the ship like a stain beneath paint. My limbs pressed against pipes, bulkheads, storage lockers. Every corridor, every deck, every hidden compartment. I learned it all, inch by inch, feeling the vibrations of each footstep through the frame. The passengers delighted me, so loud, so unaware. They laughed as they danced. They clinked glasses during the midnight buffet. They posed for photos on the upper decks with the ocean at their backs. And under their feet, I crawled. I learned their routines, their roots, their weaknesses. I waited until the 5th night. The ship entered a patch of water so still, it looked like black glass. The engines hummed steadily. The hallways quieted. Most of the passengers slept. That was when I began. In the crew quarters, I slipped fingers through the vents, thin, skeletal fingers that tapped lightly on the metal like dripping water. One by one, sleepy crew members woke to the sound. Some checked the vents, some didn't. Those who did saw movement they tried to explain away. Shadows shifting behind grills, shapes pressing against slits, 2 pale eyes watching from inside the ductwork. When they leaned close enough, I touched their faces. They screamed. No one heard them over the engine noise. I dragged them into the ventilation system, bending the ducts open from the inside like foil. Their bodies twisted easily in the dark passages. When one got stuck, I pulled harder. Something tore. It didn't matter. The ship barely noticed the loss of a few crew members. Passengers cause panic. So I chose him, the man in cabin 328. He'd been awake all night drinking on the balcony, bragging to strangers about his business, his money, his strength. Humans like him taste different, bitter, dense, filled with unnecessary confidence. He stepped into the cabin just as I was opening a seam behind the bed. The wall bulged outward, a long ripple under the wallpaper. He blinked, confused, reaching for the light switch. He didn't make it. My arm burst through the wall with a wet metallic snap. Jagged steel curled around my limb like broken teeth. My hand caught his torso, 5 blades digging into his ribs. He didn't scream at first. Shock silences most humans. I lifted him from the ground, his legs dangling, blood dripping onto the carpet. He grabbed at my arm, tried to pry himself free, but my grip tightened. Bones shifted under his skin. Then he screamed. He screamed loud enough for the cabins nearby to wake. Doors opened. Voices murmured. Footsteps approached. But no one entered. Because, as he screamed, I dragged him back into the wall. The wallpaper stretched. The metal bent, then closed behind him like a mouth. By the time security arrived, the room was empty. Only a long smear of blood on the floor suggested anything had happened. They tried to investigate. They failed. Every time they approached the lower decks, I rearranged myself. Walls shifted, doors jammed. Lights flickered, cameras broke. Their radios filled with static that sounded like breathing. They were chasing something inside the bones of the ship. And I was growing. With every body I took, I gained shape, mass, strength. The ship sailed on, oblivious, until the 7th night. That was when I finally stepped out of the metal. Not fully, not yet, just enough. My upper torso tore through the wall of the cargo bay, dripping black fluid, metal clinging to my skin like armor. My face wasn't human, just an impression of one, stretched too thin, warped by the steel that shaped me. A group of crew members saw me. They ran. I didn't chase them. Not immediately. I wanted them to warn the others. I wanted fear to spread deck by deck until the whole ship knew what their walls had been hiding. By dawn, dozens were missing. The captain tried to turn the ship toward the nearest port. The ship didn't respond. Because I wasn't inside the ship anymore. I was the ship. Every corridor, every wall, every plate of steel. I moved through the hull like blood through veins, choosing who to take next with the care of a predator, savoring its hunt. And when the ship finally returned to land days later, drifting silently into harbor with no distress call, there was no one left on board except me. Still pressed between the steel, still waiting for another crew, another voyage, another chance to be awakened by the sound of footsteps echoing through my body. He should have stayed near the reef. All the other tourists did. They splashed around the bright corals, kicking lazily with rented fins, drifting in water so shallow the sunlight painted their backs. They laughed, shouted, treaded water, so loud I couldn't reach them. But he wasn't like them. He wanted silence. He wanted depth. He wanted the untouched spots the guide warned him not to explore. And silence is where I live. He swam past the marked area in smooth strokes, leaving the chatter behind. The water grew darker with every kick, fish thinned out. The ocean floor sloped downward to toward the place where the cliffs opened into caves. Into my cave. I felt him long before he entered it. His breath through the snorkel carried vibrations into the water, steady, calm, almost rhythmic. It was a sound I had been starving for, the whispers of a living creature, pulsing through liquid, drifting into my hollow. He paused at the entrance, treading water. He didn't know why, but something about the opening unsettled him. The mouth of the cave looked like a jagged wound cut into the rock, black and unmoving even as the sea breathed around it. He hovered there, debating whether to go in. So I called him. I didn't use words, not at first. I exhaled softly from deep within the cave, sending a gentle current outward, a warm one, an impossible one. It brushed against his stomach and chest, inviting, coaxing, promising calm where there should have been cold. He leaned forward, and then he heard me, not through the water, not through his ears, through the snorkel. A whisper so faint, it blended with the sound of his own breathing, as if someone else were inhaling with him. He froze. Another breath, another whisper riding on the air. Come. He lifted his head out of the water, ripping the snorkel from his mouth. He gasped, looking around wildly. No one was near him. The nearest swimmer was a distant speck. He laughed nervously, shaking his head. Then he put the snorkel back in. He shouldn't have. As soon as his face submerged, I whispered again, clearer this time, flowing into his mouth with the air. Come in. He jerked upright again, coughing. Still no one near him, still only silence. But now, the idea had already taken root inside him. He wanted to know what was inside the cave. They always do. He took a deep breath and kicked forward, slipping into the darkness. Inside, everything changed. The water was colder here, thick, almost syrupy. Sunlight couldn't reach past the entrance. Only a faint blue glow lingered, filtering through algae on the walls. He swam slowly, hand brushing the rock, keeping himself oriented. I moved along the cave ceiling above him, sliding like an eel through the cracks, my body long and narrow, each segment shifting independently. He didn't see me, just the shadow I cast for a moment on the sand below him. He stopped. I stopped. He hovered mid-water, ears filled with the muted thump of his heartbeat. His breath was faster now, rasping through the snorkel. Perfect. I whispered again, right into the tube. You're close. He spun around, splashing, bubbles swirling around his mask. Panic made him kick too hard, scraping his fin against the rock. The noise echoed. He turned back toward the entrance. Dark, darker than before. He turned deeper into the cave, also dark. He was trapped between choices he no longer trusted. The whisper came again. This way. He couldn't tell where this way was, so he swam forward, and I followed inches behind him. As he moved deeper, the passage narrowed until he had to turn sideways to squeeze through. His breath hitched with every exhale. The sound bounced off the rock, vibrating through the water and into me like an irresistible pulse. I extended a single tendril toward him, thin as rope, cold as the deep, It brushed the back of his calf. He froze, kicked wildly. His fin struck stone. He twisted mid-water, mask wobbling, searching for what touched him. He found nothing. I withdrew, retreating into the cracks just before his light flickered over the spot. He considered turning around, but fear does strange things to humans. It pushes them deeper instead of back. He swam faster. The cave widened unexpectedly, opening into a chamber sealed from the surface. No light reached it. Complete blackness. He hovered at the threshold, breathing loudly, each inhalation and exhalation booming inside his head. He raised his wrist light. The beam cut through the dark and landed on me. Not all of me, just one eye, huge, pale, veined like marble, set deep into the rock wall. His body convulsed with terror. He tried to kick backward, but his fin tangled in the uneven floor. He dropped the light. It spun slowly downward, illuminating the chamber in stuttering flashes. He saw shapes, my shapes. Arms that weren't arms, ribs exposed but still moving, tendons stretched like wet cords, mouths without faces, stitched into the walls. Bodies, many bodies, half consumed, embedded in the stone floor like roots frozen mid-growth. He screamed into the snorkel. I swallowed the sound, and he tried to swim for the exit, and I took him. My tendrils unfurled from the ceiling like strands of seaweed, wrapping around his wrists, chest, ankles. He struggled violently, thrashing, sending clouds of silt into the water. His mask filled with fog. His breath broke into rapid, shallow bursts. He nearly dropped the snorkel. I wrapped one tendril lightly around his throat. Not enough to kill him. Not yet. He looked straight ahead, eyes bulging with terror. Into darkness. Into me. You heard me, I whispered into the snorkel, my voice flowing into his lungs with the air. You followed, he convulsed. And now you stay. I dragged him downward into the soft silt, into the bodies buried there before him. The cave floor opened slightly, welcoming him like wet sand yielding under a heavy step. He sank slowly, screaming into the tube as I pulled. He tried to claw upward, but the silt swallowed his arms to the elbow. He kicked upward, but I tightened my grip around his legs. His last breath stuttered out through the snorkel, a panicked, wet choke. I pressed my tendrils across his mask, pushing it gently, firmly, until it cracked. Water surged in. He inhaled instinctively, and that was the end. He sank into the cave floor, becoming part of the mound beneath me. A new voice added to the chorus of muffled echoes trapped in the mud. And now, whenever someone swims too close to the cave entrance, whenever a snorkel dips just below the surface, I whisper again. Because someone always hears, someone always follows, and someone always joins the others in the dark. They call it a ghost ship. Empty deck, no crew. Fog so thick it swallows sound. A vessel drifting with no lights, no engine, no purpose. But the ship was never empty. Not when they found it. Not now. Not ever. I was already inside. The fishermen were the first to see us that night. Their small boat cut through the fog, lantern swinging from a hook, the light swallowed almost instantly by the grey walls around them. They were heading home, exhausted, their nets full, their spirits low. Fog steals more than vision. It steals time, distance, hope. One of them spotted the silhouette first, a massive hull emerging from the white void, silent and still. A cruise yacht, expensive, immaculate, and dead. They approached with caution, calling out to see if anyone answered. No voices came, no footsteps, no movement, just me, waiting. One man threw a rope, tying their boat to the ladder. The metal rung was wet, not with seawater. He didn't notice they climbed. 3 of them stepped onto my deck, boots landing on the slick planks with a hollow thud. Their lantern illuminated only a small circle around them, unable to push back the fog that clung to the ship like a second skin. Looks abandoned, one murmured. Shouldn't be. Not out here, another replied. I heard every word. I remembered their footsteps from the last time humans were aboard. I remembered the screams, the pounding fists against the inside of my walls, the way the deck absorbed blood like thirsty wood. I remembered everything, but these new men, they knew nothing. They split up. 2 moved toward the stern. One stayed near the bow, checking for signs of life, peering over the railing into the fog. He was closest to me. I let the deck beneath him shift. Just a small ripple, like breathing. He frowned, tapped the wood with his boot. It pulsed again. He backed away slowly, heart quickening, eyes narrowing. Something in him understood the wrongness. Humans sense danger before they name it. He reached for his radio. I opened the deck. Just a crack. Just enough. 2 boards separated under his feet, like lips forming a whisper. A warm, dark liquid seeped upward between them, thick, sticky, metallic smelling. He crouched, touched it with a fingertip, and recoiled. Blood. Old, but not dry. Never dry. Before he could stand, the board snapped open wider, a jagged mouth tearing itself into the deck. A hand, half wood, half flesh, burst out and grabbed his wrist. He screamed. The ship swallowed him in one motion, dragging him beneath the planks, crushing his ribs. As the boards snapped shut again, silence returned instantly. Fog rolled across the deck, covering the small streak of blood left behind. 1 down, 2 to go. The other 2 men heard something. Maybe his scream, maybe the crack of splintering wood, but the fog twisted the sound, bending it, muffling it. They hurried back toward the bow, calling his name. No answer, only fog. They raised their lantern, sweeping the deck with shaky hands. That's when one noticed the footprints, a trail of wet prints leading across the ship, but facing the wrong direction, as if someone had walked backward, as if someone had been dragged. Jesus, he whispered. The prints ended abruptly at the center of the deck. The boards there were bulging upward. He didn't see me press against them from below. Maybe he fell, one said. But the way he said it, even he didn't believe it. They stepped closer. The deck swelled again, slow, heavy, like something huge beneath the wood was rising toward them. The lantern flickered wildly. A groan rolled through the ship, deep and guttural, vibrating through every plank. They stumbled back as the fog thickened, swirling in unnatural spirals. They tried running. I didn't let them. I stretched the deck beneath their feet, not breaking it, shifting it. The planks lengthened, bending, twisting, forming narrow ridges like ribs. They tripped over them, falling hard. One landed face first, the other dropped the lantern, which shattered. Darkness swallowed them. They scrambled to their feet, but the deck moved under them like a breathing creature. The boards rose and fell in waves. Something slithered between the cracks, brushing their boots. That was me, growing, unfolding, waking fully. One of the men bolted toward the railing, desperate to jump back to their fishing boat. He never reached it. A section of the railing warped, bending into a hooked shape. It swung like a stiff wooden arm and struck him in the chest, knocking him overboard into the fog. There was a splash, then nothing. The sea below me is never merciful. The last fisherman fell onto his back, staring up as the fog parted just enough for him to see the ship's mast, and the shape wrapped around it, my shape. Not fully human, not fully wood. Long limbs fused with rope and plank. A torso stretched thin, ribs exposed, moving like the hull itself was breathing. A face carved into the grain of the wood, shifting slowly, too slowly, as if learning how to mimic expression. He screamed once, and I fell on him, not with claws, not with teeth, with the entire weight of the deck collapsing around him like a rib cage tightening. The wood absorbed him, his body cracked. Once, twice. Then he was gone, swallowed into the ship, where all the others stayed. The fog closed in behind me. Hours later, the fishing boat drifted away, ropes severed, unmanned. The ghost ship floated onward, silent once more. They'll say the men got lost in the fog. They'll blame the sea, the weather, the night. They won't blame the ship. They never do. But ships remember, and I am every board, every nail, every soaked piece of timber in this drifting carcass. I am the weight in the fog, the whisper in the hull, the shift beneath your feet when no one else is around. And if another crew finds me, if they climb aboard, calling out into the grey silence, I will open again, because a ship like me doesn't need wind. I don't need a destination. I only need bodies to fill the empty spaces inside my wood, and there is always room for more. He wasn't my first. The villagers always pretend they don't know what happens on that stretch of beach. They warn children not to play too close to the shoreline when the tide is climbing. They avoid the sandbars at dusk. They speak of currents, undertow, unpredictable waves. They never speak of me, but they know. They've known for generations. And still, every few years, someone wanders too close when the water begins to rise, and I take them. This boy, he was young, 10, maybe 11, barefoot, sunburned, running along the wet sand, while his parents set up their umbrella farther back. They weren't watching him. Children are never watched closely enough. He came straight to me, The tide was low when he arrived, just a thin sheet of water gliding back and forth, licking the shore, seeping between the grains of sand. He stepped into it without hesitation, splashing, giggling, chasing small flashing fish that darted between his toes. The water embraced him. I embraced him. Even before I surfaced, he felt me. A sudden warmth around his ankles, too warm for ocean water. A small tug on his foot, too deliberate for a current. The faintest vibration in the sand below him, too steady to be natural. He paused, looked down, and frowned. The sand under him bubbled. Just once. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, then laughed nervously. He thought it was air escaping between shifting grains. He was wrong. I exhaled again. The sand shivered beneath his feet. A long ripple passed under him, traveling outward like something huge turning over. Just beneath the surface, he backed up a step. The ripple followed. He called for his parents. Just a small shout, not fear, more annoyance. They didn't hear him over the waves. Then he took one more step back. That was all I needed. My first hand broke the surface. Not fully formed, not flesh. Just a cluster of blackened sand grains rising as one, merging, hardening, shaping themselves into the suggestion of fingers. The boy froze. He stared at the shape. It crumbled instantly, collapsing back into loose sand. He shook his head, rubbed his eyes again, looked around. No one saw. No one ever sees the first sign. He stepped forward again. Curiosity defeated caution. The water reached his shins now, tide coming in quicker than he realized. The foam swirled around him, wide and innocent. He kicked at it playfully. I rose again, higher this time. A mound of sand bulged beneath the water, forming a hump just behind him. It rose like something breathing under a blanket. He felt it. He turned around, eyes widening. The mound sank instantly, dissolving into the shifting shallows. He whispered, "Hello?" I answered by pulling the sand from under him. It happened subtly, a small collapse, a sudden sink. His left foot dropped 3 inches before he caught himself. He gasped, tried to pull his foot free. The sand tightened, just a little, just enough for him to panic. He struggled harder, twisting his leg. Water splashed around him. The sand held him firmly, but not painfully. I wanted him afraid, not injured. Not yet. He called out again, louder this time. His parents turned, saw him, and waved. He waved back weakly, trying not to cry. He didn't want them to think he was scared. That's the problem with children. They hide fear too well. The tide surged forward in a sudden swell, reaching his knees. He cried out as cold water slapped his stomach. The sand under him opened, not visibly, not like a mouth. It simply parted, loosening in all directions, becoming something deeper, something hollow, something hungry. His right foot slipped into the void. That was when he screamed. His parents stood up, started running. Too late. When he tried to run toward them, the sand tightened like a fist. Both feet were trapped now, ankles buried, pulled down to mid-calf. He leaned forward, grabbing at the wet ground. but his fingers sank uselessly into the soft mix of water and grains. He tried to climb out, tried to crawl, tried to scream again. I pulled harder, slowly, gently, patiently. His knees vanished beneath the surface. His parents were sprinting now, yelling his name, dropping towels and bags behind them. He reached for them with both hands, sobbing, water splashing up into his face as he clawed desperately at the beach. The sand rose around him, not like a wave, like a body. Hands, many hands, formed beneath the water, shapes molded from grains, tendons shaped from pebbles, joints forged from shells. They pressed against his legs, his hips, his waist, pulling, pulling, pulling. By the time his parents reached him, only his chest remained above the sand. His father grabbed his arms, pulling as hard as he could, veins bulging, tears mixing with salt water. The mother wrapped her arms around the boy's torso. Screaming for help, I let them pull. For a moment, enough for hope, enough for heartbreak. The sand sucked him down with a wet, slurping sound as his parents lost their grip. His head went under for a moment, just a moment, but it was enough to drown his scream. The father dug frantically at the sand with both hands, shouting, pleading, choking on his own terror. But every handful he removed, I replaced with more. The sand was alive under their palms, alive with me. The mother tried to lie flat, to spread her weight, to keep herself from sinking as she reached into the collapsing pit with both arms. She screamed his name over and over, each call growing hoarser, more broken. They never touched him again. His head resurfaced once, only once, as if taking a final, panicked breath. His eyes were wide, mouth open, hair plastered to his forehead. He looked straight at them, then he was gone. The sand closed over him with perfect smoothness, erasing every trace. The parents clawed at the spot until their fingers bled. They still come back every year on the same day. They leave flowers on the high sand. They cry to the waves, asking where he is. They don't understand. He's right there, inside the tide, inside the sand, inside me. And when the water rises again, when the beach empties, when another pair of small feet runs too close to the shoreline, I will rise too, because I am the hunger beneath the sand, the hands inside the tide. And I have never taken just one. They thought their metal shell would protect them. That's what submarines are for, after all. Keeping fragile bodies alive in a world that crushes everything else. Steel walls, reinforced hull, 1,000 meters of water above them. But steel is just bone, and the deep is where I live. They entered my dark quietly. I felt the vibration long before I saw their lights. Slow pulses echoing through the trench like a distant heartbeat. Their engines hummed with confidence, slicing through water that has never known sunlight. Humans always think they're the first to descend this far. They never imagine something has been waiting below them, waiting for them. Their submarine hovered above the trench, its spotlights weak and trembling, their beams fading long before they reached the sea floor. Inside, I could hear the crew breathing, steady at first, and quicker as they realized how heavy the silence was down here. Silence has weight, and mine pressed on every inch of their hull. I reached the metal first with one simple gesture, a tap. Not loud, not violent, just a single knuckle hitting steel from the outside. Tock. The sound echoed through the control room. The captain froze. The sonar technician frowned at his screen. Someone whispered, "Did you hear that?" They thought it was debris, a rock, the shifting of thermal layers. They were wrong. I tapped again. Tock. Their lights flickered. That was when their hearts began to hurry. I wrapped myself along the hull, stretching from bow to stern. I have no fixed shape at this depth. Pressure gives me form, and pressure takes it away. One moment, I am a long shadow. The next, I am a membrane across the viewport. The next, I am nothing but weight. But they could feel me. The submarine listed slightly to the left. The ballast tanks complained. Metal groaned. Just a whisper of stress, but enough to send fear crawling along every set of ribs inside. The captain ordered a systems check. They found nothing. Of course they did. Pressure leaves no fingerprints. I slid over the front viewport. They didn't see me, only darkness. Not the usual deep-sea darkness, but something thicker, like ink smearing across the glass. One of the crew leaned closer. He pressed his face to the window, squinting, trying to make out shapes in the abyss, so I showed him one. A single pale eye. Not human, not round. A stretched vertical slit, glowing red like a dying ember. It blinked. He stumbled backward, crashing into his chair. The others rushed to him. He tried to speak, but could only point at the viewport. When they looked, the eye was gone. Only black water. Only me, watching from the other side. Panic grew. They whispered now, argued, checked oxygen levels, checked hull integrity, checked sonar. Sonar was the worst. It began as static soft, crackling. Then, beneath the static, a slow pulse emerged. A rhythmic beat, a sound like a giant hand slamming down somewhere immeasurably far away. Not an animal, not an echo. A heartbeat. Mine. The sonar tech went pale. It's surrounding us, he whispered. He was right. The submarine descended further, trying to escape upward currents, but the deeper they went, the more they sank into me. I increased my grip. The hull creaked. A long metallic whine echoed through the sub, like the walls themselves were begging for mercy. Someone shouted, "We're exceeding safe depth." Safe depth. There is no safe down here. I should have known that. I pressed my weight against the starboard side, slowly, gently, the way a child presses a finger into clay. The metal dented. Alarms blared. Lights flashed red. The captain screamed orders. "Ballast reverse. Ascend. Ascend. Now!" The engines roared. The submarine strained upward, but barely moved. Because I held it, the pressure outside increased. Not natural pressure, but deliberate, focused, intelligent. It tightened around the hull, like a fist closing around an eggshell. The youngest crewman began sobbing. Another clutched a rosary. Someone vomited from fear. I dragged the submarine another 10 meters downward. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost crept across the interior walls. Their breath fogged in front of their faces. Humans fear the dark, but cold terror. The kind that sinks into bone. That's the fear they cannot fight. One of them approached the viewport again. He shouldn't have. I pressed my face to the glass. Not a full face. Not something defined or human. Just a shifting mass of red veins and black fluid, arranged vaguely like something watching him. Something learning him. He screamed and scrambled backward, knocking over equipment. The captain shouted for calm, but calm was gone. The lights went out. Total blackness, broken only by the emergency lamps glowing red. Red is my color. They huddled together now, whispering prayers, arguing in harsh breaths, desperately tapping controls that no longer responded. The submarine shook, not from the ocean, from me. I rocked it side to side, back and forth, listening to their bodies thump against the walls, feeling their terror vibrate through the floor. I tightened my grip again. The hull let out a sound like a dying animal. Then came the first leak. A thin jet of water shot through a hairline crack, slicing across the room. One crew member screamed as the freezing water cut his hand open like a blade. He tried to crawl away. I allowed the crack to widen. A second jet burst through, this time hitting him directly in the chest. The pressure punched a hole straight through him, flinging him into the far wall. He died instantly. The others panicked completely. We have to surface. The hull won't hold. Get us out of here. Their desperation tasted sweet. I let the submarine ascend. Slowly, carefully. Just enough for hope to bloom. Just enough for them to believe they might escape. The depth gauge ticked upward. The water jets slowed. The hull moaned less. They cheered through tears. That was when I crushed them. I slammed the submarine downward with all my mass. A violent plunge into the trench. The hull twisted. Metal screamed. Lights shattered. The captain flew across the room, spine snapping against a console. The others were thrown into the ceiling, then the floor, then the walls. Another crack appeared, then another. The submarine groaned like a dying animal, and finally broke. The ocean rushed in with a roar. They didn't drown. Drowning is gentle. They were imploded, crushed in a split second into nothing but bone dust and shredded fabric. The submarine sank quietly afterward, a broken shell drifting downward into the dark, into me. I wrapped myself around the wreck, folding it into the trench, making it part of the landscape of crushed metal and forgotten screams. No one will find it. No one ever finds anything this deep. And if another vessel ever descends here, another group of hopeful scientists, brave explorers, proud soldiers, I will welcome them too. Pressure is patient, and the deep is mine. He thought the worst thing was the storm. He thought the lightning, the roaring waves, the snapping mast. That was the danger. He thought the ship's final lurch over the side, the cold water swallowing him whole, the desperate scramble toward the floating debris. That was survival. He was wrong. The real danger waits in the quiet that comes after the storm, in the long, still hours when the sea pretends to rest. In those hours, I rise. When he first found the raft, he hauled himself onto it with shaking hands, coughing out seawater, gasping for breath. He clung to the rubber edge, vomiting from fear and exhaustion. He never noticed the ripple beneath him, not at first. The raft bobbed gently. He pressed his forehead to his arms and sobbed, thinking he was alone in thousands of kilometers of open water. But he wasn't alone. I circled him slowly, tasting the warmth leaking from his body into the sea. Humans radiate such beautiful heat compared to everything else in the deep. It pulses in soft waves through the water, an invitation I accepted. The first night, he slept in fits, shivering as the wind slid over him like knives. The stars above were cold. The sea below was colder. But I was warm. When he drifted into sleep, I rose just beneath the raft, letting the thin rubber separate us. His body heat seeped into me. His breathing vibrated through the floor like a lullaby. His heartbeat thumped steadily. I matched it. Humans never realize how loud they are underwater. He dreamt of land, of rescue, of voices calling his name. He never dreamt of the enormous eye watching him from just below the surface. By dawn, thirst and sunburn had cracked his lips. He searched the horizon desperately, squinting against the glare. Nothing but flat, endless blue. He slapped the water with his palm in frustration. I felt that slap from meters below. The tremor rolled down my spine. I answered with my own, a deep thud against the bottom of the raft. Soft, controlled, deliberate. He gasped and scrambled to the center, peering over the edge. "Hello," he shouted. "Is someone out there?" I swam beneath him in a slow circle, letting my shadow drift across the water. Just enough for him to see movement. He panicked, pulling his limbs close, curling inward. He didn't want to believe anything large was beneath him. Humans love denial. It's my favorite flaw. By the second day, dehydration had begun to claw at him. He lay on his back, barely moving, eyelids fluttering. The raft drifted aimlessly on calm water. That's when I touched him, not with claws or teeth, not yet. One tendril, thin, long, barely more than a thread, slid up the side of the raft, brushing the sunburn on his arm like a cold fingertip. He jerked awake, looking around wildly. Another brush across his ankle. He whimpered. "Please," he whispered. "Please, don't let me die." His prayer drifted down to me, sweet and trembling. I wrapped one tendril gently around the bottom edge of the raft and pulled it forward, turning it slowly in the water. He didn't notice at first, but after a few minutes, he lifted his head and frowned. He was moving, not drifting, being pulled. He crawled to the opposite side, peering over nothing, because I stayed just beneath him, always beneath him. He lay back down, shaking. From below, I pressed upward, lifting the center of the raft slightly, just enough so he felt the floor bulge beneath his spine. He screamed. I let the raft settle again, flat and motionless. His heartbeat thundered through the rubber. I savored it. The third night was windless. The sea became a mirror, smooth, glassy, silent. The raft floated like a single leaf on a still pond. Clouds covered the moon, plunging everything into darkness. He sat upright, hugging his knees, twitching with every tiny sound. I rose beneath him, this time closer. Barely 10 centimeters from the raft floor, he couldn't see me, but the water changed when I surfaced. It grew warm, thick, alive. He felt it. He leaned over the side, staring into the blackness. His own reflection stared back, pale, gaunt, wide-eyed. Then, another reflection appeared beside his. Not a face, just a pupil. A massive, round, black pupil rising slowly toward the surface. He froze. The pupil grew and grew and grew. His breathing stopped. He whispered, "Oh God." I blinked. The water rippled. The raft wobbled. He fell backward, scrambling across the floor, screaming until his voice cracked. He pressed himself against the far edge of the raft, staring at the water where the eye had been. It was gone. Only ripples remained. He began sobbing uncontrollably, rocking back and forth. His mind started to fracture. Perfect. By the fourth day, he no longer slept. He sat awake, murmuring nonsense, twitching at every splash of water. His lips were split and bleeding. His skin peeled. His eyes burned with fever. And I kept pushing the raft farther from shipping routes, farther from hope, farther from rescue. Every time he drifted toward a line of distant waves, I nudged the raft gently in the opposite direction. He thought the currents were doing it. The currents were me. That afternoon, he leaned over the edge again, desperate for a sign of life. Any life, even mine. The sea was calm. He reached his hand into the water. I wrapped my tendril around his wrist. Softly, slowly. He gasped, frozen. Then I pulled, just once, a warning, a promise. He yanked his hand back, screaming, scrambling to the center of the raft. For the first time, he understood. He wasn't waiting to be rescued. He was being kept. When the fifth night came, he finally broke. He whispered into the darkness, "Please, whatever you are, please, just let me go." His voice shook with tears. I rose again beneath him, closer than ever before. The raft lifted gently as my back passed under it. He rolled toward the edge and looked down. I showed him myself, just for a moment. A long, pale ridge, a curve like the side of a massive creature. And then, one eye, enormous and unblinking, staring directly into his. He didn't scream this time. He only whispered, "Please." I nudged the raft, not toward rescue, toward me, toward the center of the circle I had been swimming for days. He slumped forward, sobbing. He knew. He finally knew. I moved beneath him, like a great shadow uncoiling, rising until the raft tilted dangerously, water lapping at the edges. He grabbed the sides, shaking violently. I rose higher. The raft tipped. He fell. His body hit the water with a single splash. He surfaced once, just once, mouth open in a silent cry. My tendrils wrapped around his legs, his waist, his ribs. His head slipped beneath the water, bubbles escaping in a long stream. Then the sea grew calm again. The raft drifted, empty, spinning lazily in the moonlight. He was never alone. No one who drifts out here is. Because I swim just beneath the surface, I wait for the storm. I wait for the silence. I wait for the lost, the desperate, the hopeless. And when they lie trembling on their rafts, staring into the endless dark, I rise. They thought the cove was untouched, hidden behind jagged cliffs, reachable only by climbing down a narrow path. It looked like paradise. Small waves, quiet air, sunlight turning the surface gold. The tourists who found it believed they were the first to set foot on its soft, dark sand. They weren't. No one is first here. Not on sand made from me. The couple arrived just before dusk, young, laughing, hands linked. Their voices bounced off the rocks, careless, unguarded. They jumped the last few steps down the path and landed on the beach with soft thuds. Their laughter pleased me. Laughter vibrates beautifully through grains. The woman crouched down first, running her fingers through the black sand. "This is weird," she said, letting it trickle through her hands. "It's so fine." He joined her, scooping a handful and watching it fall between his fingers like powdered glass. Neither noticed how the sand shifted slightly toward their hands, as if eager to touch them back. They placed their towels in the center of the cove. The tide was low, the air warm, the sky beginning to turn orange. Perfect. I lay beneath them, millions of grains, each one part of me, each one remembering every body that ever touched this shore. Their warmth sank through the sand into me. Their voices hummed through the surface. Their footsteps pressed small hollows into my skin. They didn't sense the way the sand trembled beneath their weight. Not yet. After a while, they stood and walked toward the water. The sand behaved normally for a few steps, then began to follow. A subtle shift, a faint slide, a caress around their heels. The woman paused. "It feels like it's moving." The man laughed and kicked a little mound of black sand toward the waves. The mound reformed the moment he turned away. They waded into the shallows, splashing each other, playing. Their steps churned the water, stirring me, awakening me. My grains drifted around them, clinging to ankles, wrists, calves. They thought it was just sediment. They didn't notice how the black grains climbed up their thighs, up their backs, up their arms. Not enough to scare them, not yet. Just enough to taste their skin. When they stepped back onto the beach, dripping and smiling, they didn't realize the sand no longer sloped the same way it had risen slightly behind them. A gentle swell. A mound where no mound had been before. They walked toward their towels. The mound followed. They didn't see it. They only felt the strange warmth under their feet, as if the sand had been heated by fire. The woman frowned again. "This place feels weird." I pulsed beneath her in response. Just a small shift. tightening the sand around her toes. She gasped softly and stepped back. He didn't notice. He was looking at the sunset. Humans always look the wrong way. When the sun dropped below the water, shadows crawled across the cove. The cliffs blocked the wind. The beach became silent. No waves, no birds, no distant voices. That silence was mine. They sat together on their towels, their breathing slowed, their heartbeats deepened, their weight pressed into me. I rose, slowly, carefully, a shape forming beneath the center of the beach, a bulge growing upward like a creature stretching after a long sleep. They didn't notice at first. They were kissing, always distracted by each other. My shape grew. The mound behind them rose higher, smooth, tall, shifting. The surface rippled, tightening, compressing. Black grains slid over each other like muscle forming under skin. The woman opened her eyes mid-kiss. She froze. "Do you see that?" He turned. The mound stood meters tall now, higher than them, higher than their towels, shaking, compressing, reshaping. He whispered, "What the hell?" They both stood slowly. The mound shifted again. A line appeared down the middle of it, cleaving the shape in two. The line widened. Grains fell away, revealing a hollow, dark interior. And then, arms. Two long arms unfolded from the mound, arms shaped from black sand, held together by force and memory. Fingers stretched outward, each one dripping grains that reattached themselves instantly. The couple stumbled backward. The woman screamed. I rose fully. My torso emerged next. Long, lean, human-shaped, but impossibly wrong. My surface rippled with shifting granules. My face formed last. No eyes, no nose. Just a smooth mask that bulged outward like a skull made of dust. I stepped forward. Sand poured from my feet with every movement, reforming instantly beneath me. The couple backed away toward the water. The woman grabbed his hand. "We have to run." Run? There was nowhere to run. Coves like this are sealed. They keep things in. They also keep things out, like hope. The man tried to push her behind him, stepping between her and me bold. Pointless. I lifted one sand-formed arm. Grains trickled. Fingers curled. A shape of a hand reached for them. The man threw a rock. It passed through me harmlessly. He screamed. I pressed my palm flat against the sand. The entire beach moved. The ground rippled outward like a shockwave. Black grains rolling toward the couple in a wave of shifting skin. The woman fell first, sand swallowing her legs instantly. The man grabbed her wrists, pulling, screaming her name. The sand tightened. I didn't need to drag her. I let the beach do that. She sank to her knees, then her hips, then her waist. The man clawed at the sand, shouting, crying, cursing. His fingers disappeared beneath the surface as he dug. The sand swallowed his hands. He screamed again. I stepped closer, towering over them, shadow falling across their faces. They looked up at me, mouths open, terrified beyond reason. I knelt, my face lowered toward theirs, smooth, eyeless, empty. Sand shifted where eyes should be. A mouth began to form, just a slit at first, then a wide, unnatural curve. The woman sobbed, "Please, please, don't." But the beach had already pulled her down to her rib cage. The man leaned over her, trying to keep her above the surface, but the sand clung to him, too. His arms sank to the elbows. His chest followed. He screamed her name. She screamed his. I placed one fingertip on the man's forehead. Sand poured down his face, filling his mouth, his eyes, his ears, into him, through him. He stopped screaming. He was dragged under in one violent pull. The woman followed seconds later, her final breath swallowed by a spray of black dust. Silence returned. I dissolved. The mound collapsed into a smooth, quiet beach again. Waves washed the edge. The sunset faded. The cove returned to serenity. No bodies. No footprints. No sign of struggle. Only black sand. And now, two more voices whispering beneath it, waiting for the next pair of feet to step too close to the shore. They built their platform on my skin. They drove steel legs deep into the ocean floor, drilling through layers of silt and bone, anchoring their floating city to places humans were never meant to touch. They believed the thick cables that held them steady were nothing but engineered muscle, unbreakable, untouchable, safe. But the cables were not alone. They were my path, my ladder, my veins. The workers called it the hum. Every few nights, when the wind died and the waves flattened into a dark mirror, the anchoring cables began to vibrate, a low, trembling sound, barely audible, more felt than heard. They blamed currents, tension, temperature shifts. They didn't blame the creature pulling itself upward. They didn't blame me. On the first night, I only touched the lowest cable. My fingers wrapped around the thick braided metal, gripping it like a spine. Barnacles and algae clung to my skin as I began to climb, letting the cable's tension vibrate through my body. Every tremor carried information, heartbeat rhythms from above, footsteps crossing metal walkways, machinery stirring like restless lungs. The platform was alive with people, curious, fragile people. I climbed, slowly, deliberately. With each pull of my arms, the cables released a faint metallic whine. The workers felt it through the floor. They shivered. They didn't know why. Halfway up the cable, I stretched my body along its length, tasting the rust, the oil residue, the warmth radiating downward from the platform's pylons. My legs dangled into the blackness below, drifting with the current like strands of kelp. Up above, one worker noticed something strange. A faint scratching noise through the grates, a distant echo under the walkway, a vibration rising through his boots. He leaned over the railing and stared down into the dark. Nothing. The surface hid me well. He flicked his cigarette into the water. It landed on my head. I caught it, crushed it between two fingers. Then I climbed faster. By the second night, I reached the underside of the platform. It was a forest of steel beams and pipes, glowing faintly with heat, dripping with condensed moisture and old oil. The hum of machinery shook through every surface. Up here, no one looked. No one listened. I stretched along a horizontal beam, flattening my torso until I was almost indistinguishable from the dark metal. My fingers curled around the edge, leaving faint trails of slime. Then I reached out, a single finger. Long, thin, knotted like driftwood, I scraped it along the metal. CHNK. The sound echoed through the pipes into the living quarters above. A mechanic paused his inspection. A cook lifted his head from the sink. A security guard turned off his radio and listened. The pipes groaned again, but I didn't move. I waited. Patience is older than the sea. On the third night, I pulled myself fully onto the platform's underside. My body coiled around the beams in a long arc. Torso stretched, limbs trailing behind me like loose cables. My skin, slick and dark, blended seamlessly with the shadows. The machinery vibrated through me. I learned the rhythm of the platform's heartbeat. Humans walk differently when afraid. Their steps change weight. Their breath changes pitch. Their heat changes shape. I wanted to meet one. Only one. To start. The first to come close was the night engineer. He climbed down the ladder under the platform, flashlight bouncing in small arcs. His boots clanged softly on the metal. He was investigating the noise. He should have stayed above. When his light swept over the beams, I stayed perfectly still. My limbs hugged the cables, stiff as frozen rope. My body flattened against the steel like a shadow. He looked directly at me. The light passed over me. He saw nothing. Humans only see what they expect. He turned away, inspecting a valve. I followed, silently. Hand over hand, crawling upside down along the underside of the walkway until I hung directly above him. Head down, limbs dangling, body swaying. My shadow fell over the back of his neck. He shivered. He reached for his wrench. I reached for his throat. My hand wrapped around his neck gently, almost tender, before tightening with slow, crushing force. His flashlight dropped, bouncing against beams before splashing into the sea. He choked out a small, wet gasp. The platform groaned around us. He struggled for breath. I pulled him upward. His boots kicked against the beams as I lifted him into the shadows, his fingers clawing at my arm, leaving trails of skin behind. He disappeared before he could scream. The platform hummed. I fed. By the fourth night, they noticed he was gone. They searched the surface, radioed nearby ships, scanned the waves. No one thought to look beneath. Not until they heard the cables again. Vroom! The vibration was louder now, stronger, alive. The security team gathered at the edge of the walkway, shining flashlights into the depths. Something's climbing, one whispered. I smiled. A row of teeth slid into place along my mask-like face. Teeth too many, too jagged, too uneven. My jaw unhinged slightly. A drop of black water fell from my mouth to the sea below. They mistook it for oil. One leaned closer. I grabbed his ankle. His flashlight fell and hit the water. He didn't. He slammed into the underside of the platform as I pulled him through the railing. His bone cracked against the metal. The second guard lunged forward to grab him. I took him too. It was easy. Humans always try to save each other. It only means more for me. Now the platform trembled constantly. The cable shook with every step I took beneath it. Workers huddled together inside, locking doors that locks cannot protect. They whispered about sabotage, about structural failure, about creatures. They said the word creature softly, as if it might hear them. They were right. Every word vibrated through the beams straight into me. The fifth night was the last. The platform's alarms blared, lights flickered, voices screamed. They tried to escape in the lifeboats. I climbed the cables faster than their engines could lower a boat. My arms wrapped around one cable, then another, then a third, coiling upward like a massive, wet serpent. The workers on deck saw my silhouette rising. Long branching limbs, a torso that split and reformed like liquid shadow. They froze. Humans freeze so beautifully, I reached the deck. They didn't have time to run. My hands, too many hands, slammed down across the metal, dragging bodies toward the edge. Some I threw into the sea, some I kept, some I broke. The platform tilted. One of the cables snapped. The whole structure groaned, and I climbed again, back down into the dark, pulling the platform with me, inch by inch, until half of it sank into the black water. Now, it rests there, crushed, half submerged, silent. No rescue crew will find survivors, because there are none. Only me, coiled around the remaining cables, waiting for another platform, another set of footsteps, another vibration in the metal above. The sea is deep, and I am always climbing.